There was a video, I investigated the human extinction movement by Timmy Two Cents. I'm just going to call him Timmy. I don't know if that's his real name, but that's his channel. Now, even though the title was a bit misleading, the video itself is almost professional grade documentary on antinatalism. It features philosophers like David Benatar, David Bunin, Brian Kaplan, Christine Overall, and antinatalists and pronatalists like Amanda Suknik, Lawrence Anton, Danny Shine, Inmendum, Malcolm and Simon Collins. Timmy also covers actual activism of Stop Having Kids by its founders Deeds and his fellow activist Noodles, who I think also goes by the name of Vegan Equilibrium on YouTube. A lot of arguments for and against antinatalism are covered, but in a non-philosophical, entertaining fashion. Now, Timmy is a former firefighter and a father of three children, so a lot of thought experiments we come across in antinatalist arguments about saving lives versus creating ones, etc. Well, he has actually lived through some of them. For me, the most moving part was when he tries to explain David Benatar's asymmetry to his daughters. The girls are smart, you think they kind of get it, but we are left with a shade of gray instead of binary yes or no. He also performs an actual thought experiment on his family where they almost sort of agree with antinatalist conclusions but not in very explicit terms. Now, I don't think Timmy intended this, but his creativity accidentally demonstrates that the subject of antinatalism can be discussed in a family situation along with your children and in a very civil way. I mean, the thought experiment of eating jelly beans is almost a party game of antinatalism. On to the actual arguments, Timmy goes deep on both sides. Pronatalists like Brian Kaplan and Collins Couple present some of their arguments which are eventually destroyed, well, at least in my opinion, by David Benatar. Overall, great entertaining video, a must watch for antinatalists and pronatalists alike. 94th episode of the Exploring Antinatalism podcast was out. It was an interview of Aubrey de Grey. Aubrey works mainly on aging and longevity. They talk about his main work, his book, the two foundations that he runs, and different projects. Now, you might think that this is about already existing people, whereas antinatalism is about not bringing new people into this world. But it turns out that there's a lot of intersection between longevity, immortality, and antinatalism. And Amanda skillfully lays it out on the table as she pokes and prods nuances in Aubrey's work and views. One example is of the pressure that people feel for having children due to the deadline of aging. Aubrey suggests that women are having fewer children and later in life, but the ultimate deadline is that of menopause. If this deadline can be removed, women would not be under pressure to have children, and that would actually lead them to have even fewer children. A similar analogy is made about overall life expectancy. And although much of Aubrey's work focuses on anti aging, if that could result in actual immortality, then that would eliminate at least one of the many aspects of having children. People have children for all sorts of reasons, and most of the times there is no clear winner among them. But certainly, at least for some people, the notion of living through the lives of their children contributes to their motivation of having them. But if they become immortal themselves, this particular reason goes away. There was also discussion around euthanasia and the right to die. I mean, if we are going to be given the anti aging treatment, then we should also have an option to exit peacefully. They also touch briefly upon different buttons about future of antinatalism. You know, the same ones which Amanda and Mati talk about in their Antinatalism, Extinction, and the End of Procreative Self Corruption book. Overall, this was very interesting because one, Aubrey is not an antinatalist in the sense of having a view that procreation causes harm or that other people should not have children. And yet, Amanda brings out so many not so obvious nuances from his work which intersect with antinatalism. Two, the field of anti aging is interesting in and of itself. And three, there was quite a bit of an exchange between the two in terms of arguments rather than just a question and answer format. A new book, Why Does Anything Exist? And 500 plus answers to other mysteries was published. It is available only as an ebook format. It's a compilation of answers on Quora.com by David Pearce and is compiled by Evgenia K. There are a lot of questions in it, and I skimmed through a free preview part of it. There are quite a few related to antinatalism. Is antinatalism a foolish idea? What are the arguments against antinatalism? What are the main differences between antinatalism, aphilism community, and the negative utilitarian slash suffering focused ethics wing of effective altruism community? What is David Pearce's response to vegan antinatalism's video? Why David Pearce is wrong about antinatalism? Is antinatalism incompatible with Christianity? Do you agree with antinatalism? From an antinatalist point of view, what prevents life from evolving into sentient beings again and perpetuating suffering? Aren't we closer to eliminating suffering now than the next evolution of sentient life would be at its conception? Is antinatalism a psychiatric disorder? What is the strongest argument for antinatalism? What do antinatalists think of the hedonistic imperative as proposed by David Pearce? And what are your thoughts on antinatalism? Those are some of the questions I could see in the index of the book. There's some apparent irony that's happening lately. It might sound contradictory to hear politicians from the most populous nation on the earth to start asking their people to have more babies. But that's exactly what's happening. I want to explain what the problem is and why the solution is still wrong from an antinatalist's point of view. India is a federation of 28 states and 8 union territories. There are two levels of governments in Indian states. People elect their own state governments through state level elections. On national level, they elect members of Indian Parliament, which form governments in the center called as central government, which is similar to federal government in the US. But unlike the US, it is the government of these MPs which have both executive and legislative responsibilities and powers. That's why parliamentary democracy rather than the presidential one. Today, there are 543 MPs in the parliament. The party or coalition of parties with majority of these 543 MPs rule the country. The electoral constituencies from which these MPs are elected are formed on the basis of population sizes in different areas. Population of India has long been a problem to tackle. Historically, all governments have tried to incentivize family planning and smaller families. Hum do, hamare do, we too and ours too has been a slogan that I've heard across media advertisements for decades. Large population is one problem, but inequality is an equally large problem. Not all states are equally poor or prosperous. As a result, some states have improved the quality of their citizens more quickly than others and consequently have been able to control their populations faster. Here's a map showing fertility rates in different states in India. Many, in fact, most states are now well below the replacement level of 2.1 children per woman. But there are a few which are well above this rate. Uttar Pradesh is 2.4, Bihar 3, Jharkhand 2.3, Meghalaya is 2.9, and Manipur is 2.2. As a result, the states with low fertility run the risk of losing some parliamentary seats due to their reduced populations. So, in a way, they are being penalized for doing a good job. One might argue that the people from high fertility states could move to low fertility states, and so the problem could be solved. This is not practically possible. There are no restrictions on people moving from one state to another within India, but moving such large amounts of people in a short period of time is not possible. The movement has to be voluntary, and the states differ from each other significantly in terms of culture and lifestyle. This is making politicians of low fertility states nervous. For example, Chandrababu Naidu, who is the Chief Minister of Andhra Pradesh, recently said that the government is planning to bring in legislation to make only those with more than two children eligible to contest local body elections. And Chandrababu Naidu's party is part of government in center. But even those who are in opposition in the center are joining hands. MK Stalin, who is the chief minister of the state of Tamil Nadu and whose party is in opposition in center, asked, why shouldn't we aim for 16 children? Now, of course, he didn't mean 16 children in literal sense, but the sentiment was about having more children for holding political powers. Even though this is the reason for politicians, they can't just say the way it is. They have to wrap it up in economic reasons for it to be acceptable.
Now, first and foremost, Professor Jyotsna Tirunagiri, I'd like to start with you. If you can explain what are the Chief Minister's concerns, so much so that he even wants to have incentives for families to have more children, that he's talking about, how that people with more than two children will be allowed to contest in local elections.
Good evening, Gargi, and very good evening to all my co-panelists and also the audience. Gargi, here I think put aside the political angle to it. Rest all, put it. But here we have to be concerned about a couple of things. One is the economic growth of the country, the working age, and the working age, the capability of what we are talking about, and also when we and our Chief Minister, Honorable Chief Minister, propose this particular thing. Actually, this proposal aims to extend our demographic dividend, where a larger portion of the population is of working age. This would lead to a prolonged economic growth due to a larger workforce, contributing to the economy. This is our primary motto. There are no absolutely, especially with our TDP or our Supremo Nara Chandrababu Naidu Garu, it is nothing related to politics.
Problem is, India has notoriously low employment rates among youth. Last year, Al Jazeera made an excellent documentary of how hard it is for young Indians to find work.
With more than 1.4 billion people, India is now the world's most populous country. But rising unemployment is pushing young people to the brink.
There are thousands of applications for a few tens of vacancies in government jobs. Here's an article from India Today showing that between 2014 and 2022, out of a total of 22 crore applications for government jobs, only about 7 lakh were accepted, which means out of every 1,000 job applications, only 3 people actually got employed. 3 in 1,000. Let that sink in. The issue on youth unemployment is not a superficial one of just there not being as many jobs. It runs deeper than that. As one example, let's have a look at the article in foreignaffairs.com, The Age of Depopulation Surviving a World Gone Grey by Nicholas Eberstadt. In that, Nicholas says India has a world class cadre of scientists, technicians, and elite graduates, but ordinary Indians receive poor education. A shocking 7 out of 8 young people in India today lack even basic skills, a consequence of both low enrollment and the generally poor quality of the primary and secondary schools available to those lucky enough to get schooling. So, on the one hand, we have surplus young people who can't find jobs, who we can't train for even basic skills, but at the same time, we have a concern that we won't have enough young people to take care of the old. Note that there are no ethical considerations here. The people who have any voice in these matters are either politicians, learned economists, or demographers. Philosophers and ethicists are completely absent. So then the question is, how should an antinatalist look at this situation? Should we just ignore this, saying that this is politics and population problem or something in the middle? But ultimately, this is about having or not having babies. Using children to solve economic or political problems is problematic. Antinatalists recognize this. I think we should look at the root cause of this problem. Why have we landed in the situation that we have today? The answer is clear. We started with a large population. The larger the population, the larger are the effects of inequality. Even if we agree that there would be more elderly people than young ones capable of running the show, it's not the fault of the younger generations. The problem was created by parents of those who are old today. Had we not created such a large population to start with, a lot of these problems would have been prevented. Now, I'm not supporting what Sanjay Gandhi did in 1970s to control population, namely forced sterilization. Not only was that impractical, it backfired badly politically, but it was also unethical. The point is, if creation of such large population in the first place was the root cause, having more babies can't be a solution to it. Sure, a politician can't care less beyond the next election, but as antinatalists we do and we ought to. Having more babies to compensate for the fertility differentials between states will start a population race which will not end nicely. It will bring states which have done whatever little progress in improving the quality of their citizens back to where India had started. Combine that with large young populations without jobs, easily triggered by political and religious provocations, and we have a recipe for the next civil war. Maybe that's an exaggeration, maybe not a civil war, but to have babies is to bring them into this burning house of inequality and unrest. The situation proves urgency of antinatalism, the desperate need for a mindset of thinking for the suffering of the potential children. As for the solution of this problem, we have to bite the bullet. We have to recognize that this cycle of just pushing the burden down the throats of the next generation has to stop. It means reconfiguration of our societies. It would mean we have to take tough decisions, live lives which would have been better otherwise, but we would have saved so many potential people from paying the cost for solving our problems with their suffering. So it's not an easy thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. Utkarsh Rana is an Instagram influencer with 113,000 followers, and he made a video talking about antinatalism in Hindi. The video itself itself has 51,000 views in 3 days. Utkarsh brings good arguments for antinatalism, that people have children for selfish reason, one cannot have a child for unconditional love. He also very briefly refers to suffering in life of the potential children and the consent argument. However, he makes a crucial mistake of thinking that antinatalism is only for humans. But still, it's still a good video given the reach that he has and given the format of short videos. Shashi Khushwah was born and brought up in a small village in the state of Uttar Pradesh, one of those high fertility states we talked about earlier. She is an antinatalist, atheist, and a vegan journalist. Her story of struggles because of her child free and antinatalist views was published in Hindi. She has been trolled both offline in her life and online on her social accounts for her views about antinatalism. But she has also built a strong following of child free and antinatalist people. It's an interesting story of someone who comes from a small village, works her way through higher education, doing post graduation in mass communication and masters in social work, and spreads the message of antinatalism through all the opposition around them. This proves that antinatalism is not reserved for the wealthy, privileged sections of the society. Moving on from Hindi to Portuguese language, Fernando Olszewski is the creator of Metaphysical Exile YouTube channel. He also has a bigger channel in Portuguese language. The content he produces is highly intellectual and presentation is in somber mood, provoking you to think deeply about what he is saying. He also has a website, metaphysicalexile.com, where he posts the transcripts of his YouTube content. The latest, for example, was Nature's Unluckiest Children. The news is that he has defended his master's thesis in philosophy from the University of Rio de Janeiro. The work is in Portuguese language, so I have only gone through the abstract in English. The claim he is making is that pessimistic philosophers like Arthur Schopenhauer and Emil Schron have utilized ideas from what he calls anti cosmic religions like Gnosticism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. How much of that is related to antinatalism, I do not know, but it is interesting to see the intersection of pessimism with these religions.